Tonight, high lake levels pose a threat of flooding. The South's economic prognosis, a year after the stock market crash. And the build-up to the South's biggest ever horse event. Good evening. Lake Wakatipu is at its highest level since 1984 when it flooded parts of Queenstown. More than 300 millimetres of rain has fallen in the last 24 hours, and the next 24 are critical. George Burke reports.
The lake's already 1.2 metres above normal, and fears are that low-lying areas could be swamped.
I think the next 24 hours are going to be very critical, and I think, looking at the lake and the way the weather's closing in, unfortunately the forecast for the next 2 days is still with high winds and westerlies, rain and so on, so it's not particularly good.
Does this mean that some of the shops are going to be under threat?
Could well be. I think the lake hasn't peaked yet. Even if we get no more rain, it could be another 18 inches to 2 feet before the lake really peaks at its maximum, and obviously it's going to be into some of the areas like Beach Street, Reece Street, Marine Parade.
The situation's reaching the stage where water backs up in the stormwater system, causing flooding. Already the Railways Parcels Office has been affected, with staff moving goods to higher ground. The Earnslaw Wharf looked like this at lunchtime today. The harbour master says the situation will be monitored throughout the night.
A demonstration model of Ansett New Zealand's new Whisper jet flies into Queenstown this weekend. The airlines just paid $80 million for 2 British Aerospace 146 jets to service its Rotorua, Christchurch and Queenstown routes. The weekend flight will give the locals a chance to assess the noise impact jet flights will have on Queenstown. Tomorrow marks the first anniversary of the share market crash. In the North Island, the crash meant million-dollar losses and a sharp downturn in a boom economy. But as Kurt Sanders reports, things have been different in Otago and Southland.
In a year that saw Burnside shut down, that saw corporatisation put hundreds out of work throughout the region, the share market crash was like a water main bursting during a heavy rainfall. Rural and urban economies were depressed already when the crash struck, and many say the real impact of the crash in the south has been lost opportunities. Otago development officials can cite 4 major projects that were ready to go ahead when the crash hit, drying up the investment money. In downtown Dunedin, a major cinema complex and a high-rise building never got built. And in an uncertain financial climate, investment money that could have meant expansion and new jobs has gone into safer investment. But the crash effects aren't as bad as they could have been.
The effect hasn't been as great here because in most cases people hadn't borrowed the same amount of money as they had up north, and therefore while everyone now has less assets than they did before, at least that was their own assets and not borrowed money. So
problems like a depressed rural sector can't be blamed on the market crash, and long-term problems in the region account for things like branch operations and invercargill being shut down. But people in the business say the crash has had its effects one way or another.
It had an effect on everyone because it changed people's attitudes. People became more cautious, weren't prepared to borrow money, and obviously the job opportunities weren't as great. So whether you're an investor or not, your house value probably suffered. So yes, everyone was affected.
A year after the crash, the region still has most of the economic problems it had before the crash. But now people in the business sector are cautiously confident about a slow recovery based on traditional strengths like agriculture and new earners like tourism, all in a more conservative economic climate.
As every farmer knows, growing the right kind of grass at the right time of year is nearly as good as money in the bank. And now, because of DSIR research in the south, pasture prospects are improving. As Peter Cruikshank discovered, some of the new plants being tested could boost livestock production by more than 10%.
At DSIR Grasslands Gore, scientists have bred a new strain of super clover and started on a grass to go with it. The clover's being multiplied now for release shortly, and scientists say farmers will lift production by using it after crops or in pastures run out after years of intensive all-grass farming. David Stevens says they've been bred for our cool, damp conditions and intensive sheep grazing.
We've used plants from throughout the world, basically, to create a clover that looks like this, instead of the locally used clover now, which is more like this. What will happen is this clover grows much better in the summer, and from that we will be able to grow the lambs out faster into heavier weights, which are going to achieve more of the market requirements at the other end.
This clover is 15% better than the clover in most New Zealand pasture.
This will cost them no more whatsoever, and what we're trying to do is make sure that all of our cultivars are bred under lower fertility conditions so that they will be able to handle the recessions that farmers go through when they're not putting the fertiliser on and yet still spring back afterwards. So we're trying to get more flexibility into the farming system.
The other ingredient of pasture is ryegrass. David Stevens says it's the best plant for Otago Southland and has grown 1,200 rows containing 15,000 plants from around the region, west coast and overseas. The aim is to breed a grass as good as the clover.
This is the local variety that we use already, and you can see it's much better than the Belgian varieties or the Australian varieties.
He's improving its early spring and mid and late summer growth. He says come back and look at it in 6 years.
But even now we have this ryegrass, which will go with our new white clover in 2 or 3 years' time, and already we have the potential for farmers to grow a lot more off the land than they do now.
Television's current rerun of Steptoe and Son may be aptly timed to help an Invercargill man get his message across that there's money in old junk. Not that he's a rag and bone man, Kevin Tyson works at a tip, and he also runs an unusual shop with no price tickets. Gaynor Smith has the story.
It's not a prime shopping location, but it is central city. And Kevin Tyson's pleased the council's let him set up shop here. A second-hand shop with a difference. The merchandise may have been dropped off by those who didn't want it, or intercepted at the Wallace Town tip where he's supervisor. The pricing system boils down to what the person who needs the goods can afford to pay for them. His idea was to help the unemployed, the elderly, anyone who hasn't much cash for what they need.
They come in and offer what they can afford as a fair offer. And the old story, you can get to know someone, well, I think I'm a pretty good judge of character. You get to know someone in a matter of talking to them for 15 minutes or so, and you know if they're sincere or they're pulling your leg. And if they're sincere, if they had $5, they take what they want. $2, doesn't matter.
Not every local authority goes along with scavenging from tips, and some definitely forbid it. But after some hassles, the tip supervisor has official blessing and the right licences for his second-hand potpourri. Today he's done well down the hole.
There's a radiogram, a washing machine, a stall, and I got a big armchair. And an old fella pulled up before and gave me a big set of curtains. So I was quite tickled pink.
Not only are the goods here being recycled, so's the shed they're housed in. Invercargill City hasn't produced coal gas for some years now. So customer recognition's a mite slow yet.
The biggest thing was publicity to let them know where the gasworks actually is. Half of them forgot.
Now, another look at what's on show for Dunedin's Rhododendron Week as we catch up on today's 3 o'clock temperatures. Half Moon Bay was cloudy at 3 with 13 degrees. Invercargill cloudy and 13. Gore sunny 16. Balclutha partly cloudy 13. Dunedin cloudy and 16. Palmerston cloudy 17. Oamaru fine and the high of 21 degrees. Kura, sunny and 20, Ranfurly overcast and 13. Queenstown and Wanaka both shared the low today with lots of rain and 8 degrees at 3 o'clock. Alexandra cloudy and 15 and Tayana rain and 10. And for tomorrow, Dunedin 16 and Invercargill 14 degrees. The success of Mike Todd, Charisma and the rest of the New Zealand equestrian team at the Seoul Olympics has meant a big boost for the sport of riding in this country. And with Otago and Southland already gearing up for the first ever National Pony Club Championships in this region next May, young riders are spending a lot of time with their horses.
You saw the stride,
great.
Brilliant.
Super. Oh. I think especially on the younger riders, he's their sort of idol at the moment. We've had an influx of about 25% in this branch this year. Overall, we gain some, we lose some. It's one of those moving things. But I think certainly in the eventing side, we've seen a great influx.
Anne Sharp's president of the Dunedin District Pony Clubs, as well as coach of a number of promising young riders in the city. Her daughter Rebecca was 5th in the individual placing in last year's national championships. Carmen Sycamore hasn't ridden at that level yet, but will be trying to make the Otago Southland team this year. It means hours of hard work, but the example of those Olympic heroes helps to spur them on.
I think they work really hard to get where they are today, and I think they kind of inspire a lot of people. There are a lot more people out eventing and that now.
Rebecca Sharp rides her brother Paul's horse Astra when it's available. Paul and Astra are a nationally ranked team, so they're often away eventing. But Becky hopes the horse will be around if she makes it into the Otago Southland team for the national championships. They're scheduled for Wanaka in May. It's the first time they've been held south of Ashburton, and that's a big boost for local riders who for once won't have to travel hundreds of kilometres to compete. The show jumping and dressage will be held in the picturesque Wanaka Showgrounds, and the cross-country event on the nearby Wanaka station. Some of the jumps have already been constructed, but the course committee has a few surprises up its sleeve.
There'll be some that they'll find testing, but we're not out there to trap riders.
While competitors aren't allowed to ride the course before the event, some local residents are already familiar with the water jump. There's no question this must be one of the most spectacular equestrian courses anywhere. Otago Southland traditionally isn't strong in eventing, so the organisers are determined to make these championships a big success. 16 teams of 6 riders, all under 21, will take part. And already every covered yard in the Wanaka district's been booked for stabling. Until then, however, there's a lot of hard work ahead for the region's young riders before the first trials are held in February to pick the Otago Southland team.
They have to get as much experience, get their horses used to as many different jumps, travel a little bit to compete in other venues so that they don't just get used to one or two courses. And there's a lot of hard work. They have to get their horses fit and keep them fit. So they've got to be dedicated.
How realistic is it for someone like Rebecca or Carmen to aim for the Olympics, to have the Olympics as a goal?
I think probably in New Zealand it's realistic because there's not that great a number, and if we send a team from this country, you know, the number that are competing for the places are lower. It is realistic, but it's a long way off for these people.
Volunteers certainly moving along as he comes up. Now this is the big drop. Does it beautifully.
Ellen Brady reporting there. Tonight's Twilight Phone on TV2 deals with pornography. The lines are open now on 778888. We'll be back tomorrow night. Good night.